Welcome to the Data Room, where we demystify go-to-market data for financially strategic execs. We deliver real-world guidance for finance and go-to-market teams, helping them collaborate to transform their data into a strategic asset. I'm Scott Stauffer, CEO and founder at Scale Matters. I've been a CEO for over 30 years at various tech and SaaS companies, and I've seen firsthand the power of using data and data modeling to understand what drives value creation in a business. So I'm delighted to have as today's guest, Charlie Moss, CRO of TMG. Charlie is a seasoned revenue and go-to-market executive. He specializes in B2B SaaS, fintech, sales tech, and growth tech sectors. And he's got over 20 years of experience in revenue, operations, transformation, and consulting. Charlie, welcome to the Data Room.
Scott, thank you. I'm glad to be here on the Data Room and excited for our discussion.
Yeah, me too. We've had a little pre-discussion a couple weeks ago, and I thought there were some interesting topics. So looking forward to it. So Charlie, you've got a wealth of experience as a go-to-market operator, and given that the average tenure of a CRO in tech and even a CMO for that matter tends to be like less than 18 months, what's the biggest thing you think that they're getting wrong? Why is that?
Well, in my humble opinion, the fact that there's such short tenure for revenue leaders is the fact that they are relying too much on gut and not enough on data. And so, I think that being able to have a KPI stack that you can defend and which combines investor metrics and growth metrics and performance metrics that build on a foundation of data. I think that's what they need. I think also go-to-market leaders need to run their organizations more with continuous improvement in mind and almost like a program management organization that optimizes for go-to-market. So I think that, again, there's too much of their non-data driven behavior and also really not trying to continually improve and continually, just acknowledging that the market's going to change, customers change, and we have to continue to respond. And our organizations need to have to build that muscle and use those muscles to respond.
So let's focus on that data part for a second. Um, Obviously, when you're in a business that's just growing like wildfire, a lot of mistakes can be made, and it really doesn't matter, right? It tends to be, in my opinion, when companies their growth is slowing, or God forbid, they're actually shrinking, and at that point, if the revenue leaders can't offer legitimate reasons for what's going on and legitimate evidence on why they're going to take actions they're going to take to improve the outcomes, I think that's where it gets in the way, right? Because what happens then is, boards lose confidence, et cetera, because they just feel like the revenue leaders are standing in front of them and just flailing and making stuff up. Is that what you're saying when you say about lack of data? Is just without it, they don't really know what levers to push?
Yes, they don't know which data levers to pull, but they also don't really have a plan, a data-driven plan that understands their go-to-market. Let's start with the customer journey and understand the different conversion rates and how you can flow from the opportunities through to closed one, and being able to know what that path is through that. And then, because they don't have that plan, because they don't have the data to be able to show where in their customer journey that the conversions aren't really meeting expectations, they struggle with those explanations. And so, yes, I think it is often that they don't have a plan and they don't have the data infrastructure to be able to have those full funnel revenue metrics, go to market metrics, to be able to pull the levers to uh, you know be able to respond to the market and their customers.
So you see this, I see this. Do they not see this? Like, I'm trying to get at, why is this so pervasive? Because it is pervasive, and is it because they actually see that they don't have the data and therefore they don't have the models and the real understanding of how their whole go to market motion is working, and they know that, or and they just don't know what to do about it? Is it they don't know how to fix their data situation, or they just don't even recognize it?
I think they're starting to recognize it. I think you're starting to see narratives out there regarding, Winning by Design and Jocko van der Kooi have made the full revenue bow tie funnel very popular, and you can get instant kind of alignment understanding on with an executive team. Like, yeah, we should have that data, but we don't, and being able to have that data requires a data model across your marketing automation system, across your CRM, and across some kind of a post sale and or ERP to be able to understand those conversion metrics. And most organizations don't have that. And most revenue leaders aren't really jumping on the soapbox to say we need this data and we need this data infrastructure and we need to be able to build this and tell the story with data. And so I think that the cutting edge organizations are able to take the leadership to build that revenue operational foundation and start to look at those numbers and have a plan and be able to uh, understand where they are in the plan. But too many of them are, they don't have the data. They don't seem to have the leadership to work across functions as well as their operations teams to build that data infrastructure. I'm the CRO, and I can't tell you the days and stage across my CRM funnel. And I think it's a convenience to be able to say, I don't have it, and we're trying, and they still don't have it. 6 months go by, 12 months go by, and they still don't have it.
Yeah, so you mentioned in there that, potentially these revenue leaders either don't have the skill or don't have the authority to but aren't in a position to work cross-functionally, and implicit in that statement, I believe, is that to get this data right, let's use, winning by design bow tie model, right? It is by definition cross-functional. It goes across marketing, it goes across sales, customer success, you can even argue product, right? So that brings up the whole topic of alignment, and I know you've been outspoken about the need for alignment. I think you did a very nice post about a month ago. I'm also very big on creating alignment across go-to-market teams. What do you think is the best way to do that? I think you hinted at something in an earlier response about a program management office, but you've got a lot of experience to bear here from your consulting days and having to kind of drive a lot of change management. So that probably gives you a better eye into this than most. What has to happen to create this alignment?
Well, I think there's a number, there's 1,000 roads to Rome here regarding how to create alignment. I think it starts with what's the culture? What's the culture of the organization and how centralized is the ownership for go to market? And I've posted on who owns go to market, and I think there should be an owner. I think that when there's no owner for go to market, it's the tragedy of the commons. No one owns it, and too many things fall through the cracks, and you don't make the decisions or the investments like let's have a revenue architecture, a revenue data architecture where we can understand conversion rates and measure time and measure volume across the full revenue funnel. And so, it goes back to what's the capabilities of the existing go-to-market leaders? Are they comfortable driving cross-functional change and transformation, or at least just improvements? And, in my opinion, I think there's one way on one continuum, you could have a czar of go-to-market who owns all of the operations and all the strategy and can direct and dictate, this is how it's going to be as far as how we're going to, from our data to our strategy to our execution. And then on the other side of the continuum, I think you could have a much looser, much more federated model where you have a program management office with a mandate from the executive team and ideally the CEO to be able to own that data revenue architecture and the strategy, the go-to-market strategy across that. And so in the earlier case with the go-to-market czar, that's easiest. They can have a plan and drive the strategy and execution. In the latter, where you have, and I think for younger organizations, for smaller organizations, I think this go-to-market, a go-to-market PMO, program management office, where you have the mandate of the CEO and the executive team to work across marketing, sales, customer success, operations, and product to be able to put together a valuable and effective strategy to execute. And so, I think that, and it does kind of go back to my consulting days where you do have a program management office and you have a number of people that working across work streams, and you have at least weekly meetings with a fairly detailed plan, and you're held accountable by the executive team. And so you need to report out. I think that this program management office should be reporting weekly to the executive team on how the multiple improvement initiatives are going. They should also own the KPI and the KPI stack and the reporting of the KPIs. And so and do that in partnership with the functional leads that would also have be there would be sales KPIs, marketing KPIs, post sale KPIs. The finance would have their own FP&A KPIs, and I think this cross functional program management office can work across all those to make sure there's a coherent story and a throat to choke if you need to make changes or hold someone accountable.
So you talked about the czar, revenue czar. You talked about program management office. Which one is right for what kind of companies? I mean, how would you determine which approach you would go on if you were the CEO?
Well, I think you'd look at your maturity. Where are you in your maturity and your scalability? Are you a startup that has found some level of product market fit and needs to start building a foundation that can scale? Then I would go with a program management office that is able to be lean and agile and make decisions quickly and implement solutions quickly. And if you're more established, if you're over 200, 500 million ARR, and you still haven't identified who owns go to market, and you're struggling with working across very kind of set in their way functional teams, then I think at some level of a go to market czar could break some of those log jams that you might be experiencing around certain operational decisions that are being optimized at the functional level versus at the total go to market level. So I think it comes back to maturity. Where are you in your own maturity journey? And I think the more mature companies could go with a more centralized version and around who owns go to market, who owns the execution, and the younger companies could go for a smaller, more nimble approach with that program management office where they own go to market and go to market execution.
So the program management office, let's say you're a $20 million ARR company. Is that one person?
No, it's not.
Is
I'm
is it
working.
like, is that effectively a chief of staff, or are you saying you're plucking people, who are within the various functions, and in addition to their daytime job, they're being, um, anointed as part of this program office with a kinda higher level responsibility?
So I'm working with a $20 million or 20 to 30 million ARR company right now, and I would recommend that the chief of staff or the owner of this, the go-to-market architect should be full-time. That's not a borrowed position. That's their main job. But they can have a project team, a program team that has revenue operations, sales operations, marketing operations. They're someone from the sales leadership, someone from marketing leadership, someone from post-sale leadership that all have to come together and make decisions. I think someone on the executive team should be the sponsor of it. Ideally, the CEO, but sometimes that's probably a little unrealistic. But I think that there should be a borrowed team from the existing functions that have existing responsibilities in this area already. You're defining the path forward, and you're defining how the team is going to get there. You're facilitating the plan, facilitating the execution, and you have the ability to share progress and share results and drive accountability across that shared team. I've seen it work. I know it can work with these cross-functional teams, but they can get messy, and it needs someone that knows how to lead these cross-functional programs as well as an executive team willing to sponsor it. You could also have this be be supported by some kind of a consulting firm that can come in and augment what you don't currently have. So that is also as clean of an operation. It's probably really hard to do this all internally. You can start by leveraging an outside firm to serve in some capacity on that team and be able to plug some of the gaps you don't have. And ideally, ultimately, you have those services firms work themselves out of a job by helping that organization build that capability in house.
Yeah, sometimes it's just so much easier for a third party to sort of be an unbiased facilitator of cross-functional stuff. So, yeah, I've seen that at work. If you asked me, I would say, well, that's what the term revenue operations was originally conceived to be. So what happened? The whole point of evolving away from sales ops, marketing ops, et cetera, was to drive alignment. I think I'm listening to you and concluding that you're inferring that RevOps has been a failed experiment in achieving that objective.
That's a statement that can will trigger a number of people. I think that revenue operations, I mean, there's again a number of different flavors of revenue operations, and revenue operations could drive this if they have a strategic leader who understands both the strategy and the tactics and knows how to facilitate cross-functional program management and has the kind of horsepower, not the horsepower, but the capacity to be able to drive that, then yes, revenue operations could own it. I would almost argue for a go-to-market operations function that would own this, that has that strategic chops as well as the ability to have a voice at the executive committee and be able to be the proponent for the kind of change in strategy and execution that it's going to need to have. Most revenue operations today are they're either sales operations that's been given a cross-functional title, or you could have marketing operations that's been given a cross-functional title. In my one of my earlier companies, we had customer success operations as well. I mean, having all those resources, I think each function should have its own analytics that understands its business, like customer success, revenue, and marketing. But having totally disjointed teams that don't have a shared plan or shared objectives, I think is wasteful. And so, I'm not going to call it a failed experiment, but I don't think that most of the revenue operations teams today can come in with, hey, here's the strategy that we think we need to be able to follow operationally to be able to meet our objectives. And those that do, great. But I would say it's only that maybe the top 5 to 10%.
So maybe we haven't populated them with the appropriate leaders or given them organizational standing that makes it clear that they have some authority to drive cross-functional initiatives, which is clearly the case if it gets stuck under the head of sales or head of marketing or head of CS. I mean, by definition, when companies put what is supposed to be an aligning function under one of the functional silos, it will not work.
I think whispering into the CMO's ear or the CRO's ear when when they have all these other priorities, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I, unless you have a very operationally focused CMO or CRO, that's really, really challenging. And I've seen too many companies not do this well. They don't prepare the organization to continue to change. They don't prepare the executive team that it's not just the next 6 months. It's kind of going forward. We need to continue to reoptimize our go to market and be able to meet the changes. If you think that, especially like with AI these days, I mean, how many revenue teams have a good handle on how they're using AI? I think zero. And, in 6 months down the road, the expectations are going to be even more. And there's going to be more change coming down the pipeline. So, I just think preparing executive teams and the operations teams are around trying to be continuously improving and continuously optimizing is where we need to kind of set expectations. Otherwise, we're done now. Great, we can go back to no, you're never done. You can't go back to the way it used to be. Those, it just doesn't happen.
With all that difficulty of change management, right, and of moving in this cross-functional direction or highly aligned direction, do you think boards are aware of that? Or do you think this is that they don't get that this difficulty in affecting change within their portcos. Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I think any decent leader understands how hard it is to change and understands that they need to prepare the organization to be able to take on new processes, new systems, new approaches, new strategies. Are they willing to invest in that? Are they willing, do they want to have a dedicated resource, which I don't think you need, and when I come into projects, I build in change no matter whether the stakeholder requests it or not. It's just I know it needs to happen. We'll build in activities, very kind of small footprint activities to be able to ensure that the change is going to be more effectively received. Boards, I don't think that's not their first, hey, it's like we need to hit our numbers. We need to hit our KPIs, not we need to facilitate change so the organization's ready. You're never going to be able to have enough resources. You're never going to have enough time, enough people. There's always going to be constraints. And so that's as a leader's role is it's about trying to manage constraints and trying to do as good as they can with what they have. And so I think that's where, my what one thing I love to say is like, look, you don't need if we're going to roll out a new solution, we don't need to spend 3 months and go to HR around change management. I can move the needle with 30 minutes on your staff meeting and to be able to prepare your team with what's coming down and how they can support it. It doesn't, 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there will mean the difference between adoption and failure.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be some big change, heavy change effort with change experts and HR. It just needs to be understood that we need to prepare our teams and our processes around what's coming and some level of communication and allowing them to have some level of ownership and be a part of it. And you'll be much more successful.
No, I agree with that. It's just I keep thinking about how often boards keep swapping out revenue leaders. And, and at some point, you got to say, maybe there's something else more fundamental here within this culture that we should try to understand because, we're now 3 years into our investment cycle with this company, and we're about to bring in the fourth head of sales, right? I mean, at some point, you have to have uh, another tool in your tool belt than simply swapping out leadership teams. But anyway, you mentioned a little bit back about winning by design and bow tie model and stuff. And I know you've spent some time doing the revenue architecture stuff. I'm a big fan of that. Though I have a concern that it's motivating at the theoretical level, but that then many companies just struggle to operationalize it. Um, First of all, do you agree with that? And then if you do, is there another answer for why that is, or does it all go back to the same stuff that we've been talking about in terms of, change, creating alignment, that sort of thing?
Well, it's related, but the beauty of I love winning by design's product, and I think Jocko van der Kooi, if you get a chance to see him, he's one of the best performers out there as far as and his, when he gives a talk, it's a performance, and he's and it's really worthwhile to hear. The challenge, there's such instant recognition of the value of like we say, the bow tie funnel, and you can get alignment across your executive team. I did this when I first introduced it with a company where I was leading sales, and I showed the bow tie, and the founder jumped up and said, "That's it. That's it. That's exactly what I've been looking for. This enterprise view of the funnel. I know exactly what we need to improve, and I know exactly what we need to focus on." And so we had alignment in 30 seconds. There's not many tools that you can do that. However, the problem is that bow tie funnel again is goes back to the data architecture. And you've got marketing automation, you got CRM, you've got some kind of post sale. So you have to build this data model across all at least three systems to be able to operationalize that.
Mhm.
And that's where the challenge lies. And so who owns it? Who owns operationalizing that? Who's going to be the champion? Who's going to get the budget? Who's going to own that project? And that comes back to sometimes You just don't have these functional leaders willing to step up to do that. And the executive team hasn't said, yeah, this is our first priority. We want to build this data infrastructure. And that's why it's, again, if you don't have that leadership willing to step up and do that, then you might want to look at a services firm. But kind of why there's a huge appeal for the bow tie funnel and being able to use data across the customer journey. There is an implementation challenge, and because you don't have the revenue systems, because you don't have the one stakeholder who can work across all three or four organizations. But sometimes, it's great to run training and teach people how to do revenue architecture, but then you don't really teach them the need for change behind it and the change management that's required. And it's not just change management; it's the implementation skills. You have to design and build these analytic solutions that can track and report across these stages and provide the data that you need. And then you need to be able to roll it out and tell people how their job's going to change or be different with this new data and this new reporting capability. And so, there's just most revenue leaders today haven't thought through that kind of change and how you do that and really want to focus on that. It's easier to delegate it to rev ops or sales ops or marketing ops and then blame them when it doesn't, when it doesn't meet its expectations.
This is the type of work my company, Scale Matters, does, right? Goes in and um, defines data strategies, data models, implements them across multiple parts of the entire tech stack. And yeah, I mean, when you're trying to implement instrumentation in support of, let's say, the bow tie model, I mean, just let's talk about the right-hand side and all of the, stuff around, expansion and churn and, downsells and that sort of stuff. I mean, so many companies, they don't actually keep that stuff in their CRM, right? So that's when you start to have to get into the financial systems, et cetera. So it is a challenging amount and complexity of work. But obviously, in my view, it's an investment that pays off in huge dividends, but, is it just that other people don't think that? Or it just gives them a headache to even think about it? Like, I'm trying to understand why people won't make that commitment.
Well, if you put yourself in the shoes of the executive team, they've got a board meeting every month or at least every quarter, and they have to hit certain metrics, and they're trying to hit those metrics, and sometimes having that foundational capability will help that, and they'll be in favor of trying to make that investment. Other times, they're not, again, they're kinda so focused on that immediate short term. I need to go hire 5 AEs to be able to make my plan, even though right now our productivity isn't very high and our go-to-market efficiency is low and, but I still need to go hire those 5 AEs so I can go tell my board I hired 5 AEs. Some organizations can focus on the long term and the short term, others can only focus on the short term.
Yeah,
And those that can do both are gonna make the investments that are gonna pay over time, and those that can't, we're probably not gonna be around in 2 years.
yeah. Interesting. Talking about short term, at least in my view, I heard you instituted a tool when you were running strategic projects there that helped the AEs get better visibility into their pipeline, and it led to some pretty impressive results. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
You mentioned it, not me. I was gonna share with it. You can see it from my LinkedIn profile which company that was, but we, we were able to fairly quickly roll out a tool around. I mean, when people hear about account planning, they sometimes start to think, "Oh yeah, planning." They start to hit the snooze button. But what we had to do was to be able to share messaging with our sellers around how to do connected planning, and it was and we needed to get this in the hands fairly quickly. And we thought, well, what's the best way to do that? Well, the best way would be to work with them shoulder to shoulder on their highest priority accounts and show them how they could leverage this new messaging. And so we we started an account planning program just manually to be able to show them um, how to use this messaging and work with them individually in across all of the sales pods, actually globally. That effort proved to be helpful to for the AEs and the sales leaders to be able to help them be more effective in their accounts. And then we said, well, let's build a solution where we can, we have a solution, in our platform. We could build it into our platform. And so we built some of this similar kind of account planning process into the platform and roll that out similarly to all of the different sales pods and across globally, and that was well received as well. And it wasn't so much to be able to allow the A's to see pipeline better, but it really is, you know, after that second approach where we were able to build the account planning into our own platform, we had a new CRO come in who said, I heard really good things about what you're doing with account planning, but we're now going to move it into a solution called Altify. And Altify was, they were in a current account planning and opportunity management solution. And fortunately, I already had the design that we wanted to use, the design that the sellers had been using. And so we were able to, in about 6 weeks, do the design, build, test, and roll out that globally. And when I asked the CRO, why are we doing this? He said, well, we need to be able to have better pipeline visibility. We need to improve pipeline. And so that was some of our own internal objectives. And I wanted to be able to instrument that. And because we have this cloud-based multidimensional planning platform, I was able to put some of those foundations in place. After we rolled out the solution, we're able to, we were already taking weekly snapshots of the pipeline, but we were also able to understand which accounts had an account plan and which ones did not have an account plan. And so that was kind of telling piece of how why this was successful, or how this was successful, was that after we rolled this out across all of the countries and about 20 different sales pods, is that a year later we're able to go back and look at the data and say, okay, for those accounts that have an account plan and those that have made a sale recently versus those same accounts that didn't have an account plan and made a sale earlier, we're able to do that compare and contrast. And we're able to show that for those accounts with an account plan versus without earlier an account plan, that we're able to, in many cases, double the average selling price for that deal. And this is a complex sale. So you're
Yeah,
thinking
that's
somewhere
crazy.
between, the averages were 770 to 140K. And we're able to show that in this year, for those high priority accounts that where there was a sale without an account plan and then a sale later with an account plan, that we're able to show real improvement in that selling price.
That's awesome. That's the kind of data you need to drive further adoption, right? It makes it easy then.
Well, not every company is a multi-dimensional cloud planning company and has its own internal
Eats its own
initiatives to
dog
use its own
food. Yeah.
to drink its own champagne, and we're able to leverage that and use that and show some pretty incredible results on it.
Any books or podcasts or other resources that you think are particularly high value for people in go to market that are looking for practical insights that they can take into work right now?
Yeah, it's funny. I think that unfortunately podcasts are probably the new way of reading. And so there's a few that I like that help me stay informed. I like Top Line as the kind of on from Pavilion. They provide a good pulse of the market, where things are, what people are talking about. There's also really supportive community within that. I'm a big fan of John McMahon and John Kaplan and the Revenue Builders. I love to hear, and continue to reinforce how big, complex sales are managed and what that process is. They launched Medic and MedPick back in the 90s, and it's great to hear some of those. I think maybe 30 sellers from TPG are CROs. I like Revenue Builders. On the AI front, the Marketing Against the Grain with Kip and Kieran is going to keep you on the edge of what's happening in marketing or in AI. I also like the Big Technology podcast with Dylan Patel. That's a good one on AI. And then Kyle Norton has a good podcast on the Revenue Leadership podcast. He interviews revenue leaders, and he always finishes with a question around, what makes a great CRO? And it's just interesting to see all of the different responses. And lastly, anything that Mark Roberts puts out, I'm going to consume. And the Science of Scaling, I find great. So those are what I look forward to and what used to keep me informed. And so that's what I like. What about you, Scott? What's on your go-to list?
I'm shamefully going to have to answer that I don't actually pay a lot of attention to a lot of that stuff. Maybe because I'm uh, not taking the time away from work to keep learning, if you will. But those ones that you just mentioned all sounded very constructive and instructive. So maybe I'll take a look at some of them.
For me, the way I fit it in is this: it's when I'm doing dishes or making lunches for my kids the next day. I can steal some time and multitask.
That makes sense. Good for you. One more question. If you have any thought on it, is there one thing about data that you wish more people understood or cared about?
Well, I mean, one thing that about data that I think, yeah, I think people should understand is that the source of truth is relative. And so, if you go back to your board, you're going to have marketing data and marketing KPIs. You're going to have sales data and sales KPIs. You're going to have investor data, investor KPIs. And they all have their own slightly, it's hard to reconcile. And so, what I think I wish people knew is that, yeah, the source of truth is somewhat relative at times. And I think we have to be intentional on building a source of truth and understanding where that source of truth is and around for what uses of data is the source of truth, and manage accordingly. I think data should be the foundation of how we make decisions, and we should be able to defend it and should be able to continue to invest in having, what we need at our fingertips.
It's interesting because I recently did a podcast with Beth Deck, who is the CFO of Solutions by Text. And she was stressing, she almost obsesses over data definition and clarity of KPIs, right? So that you don't end up with different people giving different values for what really should be the same metric, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that a discipline around certainly defining with some precision what you mean when you're asking for things or telling about things with data is pretty important. Well, listen, Charlie, I've appreciated your time. Good conversation. All of it hits home for me, and hopefully we'll give some morsels here to the audience.
Well, Scott, thank you for what you're doing and what you're giving back. And thanks for inviting me, and look forward to speaking again.
Make no mistake, good data matters for driving efficient growth and valuations. Follow me on LinkedIn, where I'm sharing insights from CFOs, investors, and strategic go-to-market execs. Thanks for listening to The Data Room.